Good morning, interweb. Let's world build. Wait, no. The fantastic YouTuber Artifexian uses something called worldbuilding, which is creating fictional worlds, like Middle-earth, to teach people about things like astronomy, earth science, and linguistics. But if you listen to his and Bill's podcast, you know that he was hired to run 2 other YouTube channels for the Royal Irish Academy of Music. His most recent video is him explaining how he probably won't have time to do Artifexian come September 1st, seeing as how he has probably inspired hundreds of people to make their own worlds, and a ton of them are probably sci-fi based, and also that same ton are probably making languages for their worlds. I think it would be important to talk about how language will change in the future. So for starters, how many languages will there be in the future? Currently there are around 6,000 to 7,000 languages in the world. That large margin of error is mostly there not being a clear line between dialect and language. Khidnaf did a great video on it, links in the doobly-doo. It's estimated that up to 90% of these languages won't have any native speakers left within the next century. This is not because all the speakers will die from some zompocalypse, but mostly because of things like the following situation. Imagine there are 2 languages spoken in an area. One has more speakers than the other. Let's say you and your mate speak the less common one and you have a child. This child will probably speak the less common language at home when they're around you, but the more common one everywhere else. Then when that kid has a kid, they'll probably have it with someone who only speaks the more common language, and so their child, your grandchild, will probably only speak the more common language. Combating this process and saving or even zombifying a language can be very, very difficult. This can apply to sci-fi worlds very easily. If there is a large international project going on in your setting, like a space station or a colony on Venus or Mars, there will probably be even less languages spoken than the 10% left that we just talked about. Your Pakistani scientists will probably speak Urdu at home and Hindi at work, same for the Ukrainian scientists, but with Russian. If there are 100 people in a room, or 1,000 people on a colony in Mars, and one of them speaks a different language, it's easy to see who would learn whose language. Something very similar to this is how the dominant languages become dominant. They're normally so common because a large economic or political power at the time spoke it. For example, English is spoken by so many people around the world because the largest economic power for a long time spoke English. It doesn't have to be the whole world either for things like this to happen. For those who don't know, Italy wasn't really a thing until like 1871 when Sardinia decided to finally unify it all. Before that, there were dozens of Italian city-states all speaking different dialects and languages. When the government needed to choose a language to do all its bureaucracy in, it chose the Tuscan dialect, mostly because Dante wrote the Divine Comedy in Tuscan, and everyone just had to learn it. Something similar happened in China. There were and are tons of languages spoken in China, and after the Civil War, the government just chose the language that developed near the capital as the official one. All they did was change its name. Your world's universal translators might only have a few dozen languages. Another way that languages can be replaced is with lingua francas. For example, the lingua franca of science was Latin for a long time because why make everybody just learn English? The French people probably don't want to, so just have everybody learn Latin. This was probably going to happen in NATO and the UN, where they were going to make Esperanto a constructed language, the lingua franca. You can do this yourself. There are tons of constructed languages like Lojban or Esperanto or Ido or Ithkuil or Interlingua to choose from. So that whole languages going extinct thing might seem like a big bummer, so let's talk about how there will be new languages in the future, because there will be. Languages aren't inert, they constantly change. What we call accents or dialects are sort of like random mutations in language. Imagine a language as a group of turtles. This group then gets split into 2 smaller groups. The random traits that one of the group of turtles has will spread through only that group, and the random traits the other one has will spread only through that group. Maybe occasionally one turtle will go over to the other side, but it's probably not going to be something very common. This is how dialects develop. It's why people in different parts of the UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and America all sound different. If you're building your world and think that this is cool that people from New Zealand and people from Canada talk different, you can make these dialects much more different through things called sound shifts. This is where one sound is completely replaced by another sound. For example, do you pronounce these 2 words the same? Do you pronounce the E in leg and egg as more of an A sound? You could make these up yourself or take ones that already exist in nature. Let's say, for example, that people in the Cascadia region start adding K sounds after all their SH sounds, or that people stop pronouncing both the TH sounds and replace it with T or D. Another way languages evolve is words or phrases losing or gaining popularity. It was at one point considered slang to use the term raccoon, but now, aside from the terrible racial slur, it isn't. This slanderization is why people in Pennsylvania call them hoagies, why people in Texas call it coke, and why there are tons of words for these things. If you want these dialects to become so different that they are like different languages and people in Canada can't understand people in Australia, go right ahead. This happened countless times in history, most notably in Europe. There was once a great empire that conquered a ton of land and all its citizens spoke one language. Give it a few hundred years and look what happens. But if you're worried that the people in your futuristic setting, or even us today, are too interconnected for this to happen, how you speak is determined when you are a kid, and as a kid, the friends you make influence your speech much more than how your parents speak. I don't know too many kids from Letterkenny talking to people from Singapore, which is probably why there's a ton of Singaporean slang that we just don't use. So languages can split, but they can also combine. Really cool things called Creoles and Pidgins happen when languages converge. They normally happen in situations like this. You and a Frenchman are both at a flea market, for example, and he is selling apples. You walk up to him and want to buy one. You do that typical English speaker thing and try to remember those 3 years of French you took and do some sort of mating dance style thing while intensely mouthing the word apple while yelling it repeatedly. After a while, you give up and just point at it, and the Frenchman says, "Veux-tu une pomme?" Une pomme! You know the word for apple. So you start using French words, but put them in the order English would, pronouncing them a little different, and the Frenchman kind of does the same, and boom, a pidgin is born. Give it enough time and it becomes a fully fledged language, get it, called a Creole. Many of the languages in former colonies of European powers, such as the Caribbean, are Creoles that developed from some combination of either European languages or native languages. Some linguists even think that English is a Creole. The English spoken before and after the French-speaking Normans came are incredibly different, and many of the oddities, such as English's double words, come from this event. By double words, I mean English having more synonyms than tons of other languages, and also weird things such as having different names for the meat of an animal to the animal itself. The reason English has this is because the French-speaking Normans called the meat they were eating by their word for the animal, and the people raising the animal, the English peasants, called the animal by their word for the animal. That's why we have cow and beef, chicken and poultry, and tons of other ones. This is also to blame for why English has so many synonyms, and why we think big words make us sound smart. Romance languages tend to have more syllables in their words on average. Dumb smart people call themselves smart. Truly smart people call themselves intelligent. Houses are for poor people. Mansions are for the elites. Doubling up on things like this is not only an easy way to give your language quirks, as you don't have to do it with meat, you could do it with a number of things, but it also provides a great backup for the societal structure of whatever world you're making. English has been marked for the past 1,000 years by the socio-political world of 1060s England. The languages that you have in your setting could be affected by the world right now. There are tons of conflicts to choose from and tons of inequality to add weird things to the language. And also slang that can be turned into swear words that could lose their sting. There's a ton of stuff you can do just given it right now. No one really knows how language is going to change except for a few things, links in the doobly-doo, and so you're basically free to do whatever you want. Good morning, interweb. God, it's like a disease, you just can't stop once you start. So there was a lot of stuff I wanted to put in this video that I just couldn't because I couldn't figure out how to work it in, and the script was like 2,500 words at one point, and so I tried to cut it down. So there's going to be a lot of stuff listed in the description for people who want to learn more. I would like to wish Edgar the best of luck at his new job, and also an apology for bastardizing your intro slogan thing twice. As I said at the beginning of the video, he is a fantastic YouTuber, he has made fantastic content, and I assume that on his new channels he will continue to make fantastic content. So I encourage you to, if you liked this video, to go and subscribe to him, go and subscribe to his new channels if you like all of the content he produces on those, and come September 1st, I'm sure some amazing things will be happening.